My friends, GoldenEye speedrunning is an activity that someone, somewhere, has been doing every day since the game's release to this current point in time 28 years later. And what do we have to show for it all? On one hand, not too much, no sovereign nation has been improved or changed by GoldenEye speedrunning, nor any significant technological or medical breakthrough. But on the other hand, we have seen some pretty cool stories unfold through the rivalries of numerous speedrunners, and of course some amazing speedrun world records set in the game. One could make the case that the entire point of speedrunning is a community endeavor to eventually fully optimize and perfect a game by beating it as quickly and perfectly as possible. A kind of far-flung theoretical goal that may never come. But my friends, it may be coming indeed in GoldenEye 007 speedrunning as the game inches closer and closer to full optimization, every world record possible having been achieved. Well, kind of. You see, there have only been 4 new untitled records set this year, and only 2 last year. And yet the total time of the game, that being if you add up all 60 world records on the game stages, stands at a tantalizing 1:10:06. My friends, will GoldenEye's final barrier ever be broken? Will this even be GoldenEye's final barrier? Can we find 7 more seconds of time to cut from the game's individual levels to go under 1 hour 10 minutes to the elusive 1:09:59? This has been the subject of debate for decades in the GoldenEye speedrun community, so today we're diving deep, checking out old forum threads and analyzing potential world records that could lead to this ultimate barrier being broken.
Here we go!
On June 24th, 2005, GoldenEye legend Wouter Jansen achieved the untitled record of Streets Agent 113, a watershed record at the time, optimizing use of self-boosting and crisp strafe lines, at least for 2005. This record ticked GoldenEye's total time down to 1:16:59, breaking the 1:17 barrier. In the world record discussion forum topic after this record was set, we see people asking if we'll ever see that 1:16 barrier being broken, that being 60 more seconds worth of untitled records set in the game's history. An experienced player by the name of Chervone writes out a handful of times he thinks are possible, which would get us down to the mid-1:15s. Remember, this post was made in 2005, and believe it or not, all of the records Chervone has suggested have not only happened, but all have been broken too, including times we thought back then were totally maxed with no chance of improvement. They've all been broken. These sorts of discussions would play out countless times over the next 20 years on the forum and throughout the game's community. So let's take a look at some other old forum threads which ponder this discussion, like this one from November 2006. Will we ever pass the 1:15 mark, in which the OP AZ writes, "I think this is doubtful. Maybe we'll pass it in 5 years or so, if not some guy came up with a new strat. What do you think?" Another commenter writes, "I'm saying no." GoldenEye legend Wouter Jansen chimes in perhaps sarcastically with, "I vote 1:11:11, although there may be some truth or wisdom to Wouter's post. We see the reigning champion of the game at the time, Big Boss Man, write, "No doubt 1:15 will be broken. I'd say with current strats or so, 1:14 will take a good while though." The 1:15 barrier was broken less than 1 year later, in May 2007 by Boss himself with Cavern's Double Agent 138. And 1:14 less than another year later in April 2008 by Perfect Ace with Control Secret Agent 408. So this thread just goes to show, generally, just how people used to vastly underestimate the amount of time that could be cut from the game and the speed at which the time is cut. Of course, there's not infinite time to be cut from the game, as levels do have theoretical maxed times where you can't go lower. But certainly in this era, in the mid-2000s, there was way more time to cut than people initially imagined, especially when some of the game's great players like Ace, Boss, Clemens, Ilu, Mark Rutsu all got going with it. The 113 barrier was officially broken in early 2012 when Mark Rutsu achieved Train Double Agent 150. However, Clemens believed he had broken it a few months earlier in September 2011 with Silo Double Agent 122, as evidenced by the title of his old video, From Ages Gone By. Who said anything about a barrier? This is because at the time on the GoldenEye rankings there were two faked records, the infamous Henning Frigate records, which had stood on the rankings for well over a year, falsely cutting 2 additional seconds from the game's time. These were removed, so 2 seconds went back up to the total time, and thus Clem's Silo Double Agent record was not the barrier breaker, rather it was Mark's train time. Certainly a remarkable quirk of these barrier milestones, but also a display that this next barrier took nearly 4 years to happen, when previous barriers, full minutes being trimmed from the game's total time, were much more frequent. Perhaps the most daunting sign of a slowing game, or at least a game getting more and more optimized. The next 60 seconds cut for the 112 barrier would take until 2015, where we see Clemens once again perform the coup de grace with an incredible Aztec Secret Agent 131. A truly remarkable record for its time, a 3-second cut from the previous record, and it would allow Clemens to achieve an untied sweep on the stage. Now, of course, these 60 seconds were not cut only by Clemens, as numerous players contributed with untitled records over the previous couple years, perhaps inspired by new attention put on the game through live streaming and marathon stream performances, as well as some new strategies that were honed during this time, like the Cavern's Secret Agent Mind Throw through the door, which saved about 5 seconds on the stage, or various other R-lean throwing techniques, helping set new records on levels like Surface 2 or Runway 00 Agent. In August 2016, we see a great thread made by Perfect Ace, one of the most legendary barrier threads made. On this date, the total time of the game stood at 1:11:51. Ace posts, "Do you think 1:10:59 will ever happen?" Whenever we make barrier prediction threads like these, most people tend to say, yes, this barrier will be broken because we've always been proven wrong. I'll be honest and say I wasn't expecting 112 to be broken, but there was a sudden influx of new strats in 2014 and 15 that definitely helped make it possible. But I'm 100% confident this time is different. We're 52 seconds away and untides are more cooked than ever. Unless there is a major breakthrough on the level, I don't see 1:10:59 happening. Let's estimate some of the more realistic untides with current strats to see how much we can save. And then we see Ace write out a bunch of records he thinks are possible. That's only 31 seconds, bringing the total time down to 1:11:20 with all these cooked untides. So do you think 1:10:59 will ever see the light of the day? Vote! Now, the results of the poll, we do see yes winning with quite an overwhelming margin, although this poll has been active for 10 years now, so take that with a grain of salt. Even so, many more people thought this barrier was possible than didn't. But here's the thing. All of the records Ace has listed back here in 2016 have happened, and many more records, which is why the total time is now 1:10:06 rather than 1:11:20 like Ace had imagined. To prove even Ace wrong, yes, it's been a decade, but it still shows really how incorrect much of the community has been regarding these theoretical maxed times over the years. This thread would continue to see posts throughout the years, actually, one of these threads that remained active year after year. So in 2020, there's a notably interesting exchange between Henrik Weister Norgren and myself in this thread. Now, Henrik is the tool-assisted speedrun master of the game, has some of the greatest knowledge about records in GoldenEye, so a lot of wisdom there, and he writes this. Looking back at this topic, the overall theme seems to be the same as previous iterations, in that even if you list every plausible untide, you're still underestimating the actual amount of time that will be cut, and this is despite the fact that not all the predictive times have happened yet, though a lot of them did happen, of course. So a large chunk of time cut comes from unexpected world records. Out of Ace's predicted 31 seconds, only 4 seconds had not been achieved yet, and an additional 26 seconds have been cut by unexpected records. That's almost 50%. Currently, we have at least close to 30 seconds of plausible predictable untides left, but given this, should we expect there to be an additional 30 seconds that we can't predict? If so, 109.59 could happen. In which I follow up succinctly saying, even if you list every plausible untied, you're still underestimating the time cut because all of the predicted plausible records will happen, plus a lot of unexpected ones too. And that indeed seems to be the case, which is how we found ourselves in this current point in time. So that leads to only one more question. Is 109.59 possible? Can we cut 7 more seconds from the game? And the answer is simply yes. I don't have to comb over every stage in the game to find time to be cut. In fact, it's actually really obvious where we can save this time. There are only a few levels that need to be discussed here. Right off the bat, there is a little quirk going on where, if you remember the Rebecca Smith's incident, this is where a known GoldenEye speedrunner, Mirror Mage, claimed this new persona, Rebecca Smith's, achieved Frigate Agent 21, an untitled record, and posted on the rankings as Rebecca Smith's. For some reason, it caused this massive frenzy, especially among those who were sort of the administrators and members of the council which governs the elite at the time. And so the time was removed, and Mirror Mage was frozen on the rankings for 2 years in time. Well, that decision has received a lot of backlash. A lot of the people responsible for it were sort of recalled from their positions of authority in the community, and it is generally believed that Mirror Mage's Frigate 21 will go on the rankings shortly, probably around the 2-year anniversary of the Rebecca Smith's incident, which is a couple months away. And so Frigate 21 will be ranked. That's 1 second cut from the game. That brings us, a little bit closer. So can we find even more time left to cut from the game? That takes us from 110.06 to 110.05. And, well, the answer's yes. Like, Aztec 00 Agent somehow is still 133, a record I set in May 2022. A great run that I love, no doubt, but certainly improvable. Perfect Ace tied this record within 1 day using a different strategy where he uses the guard crouch glass technique, a faster technique to get the glass door open. We can see that on one hand he gets stuck for 2 seconds on this pillar at the beginning of the level, and then he also doesn't skip the body armor, which is something that we've finally been able to learn how to do on Aztec 00 Agent. Now, it's very hard to do, it's a really intense strategy, and you have to juke one drone, and then you have to take cover under a kind of angled box in the big room. You have to strafe into it kind of at a certain direction and vector angle, and it's really intense. And with the glass crouch strategy, you tend to take more damage than with other techniques to get the glass door open, but even so, it is probably possible that Ace could save 2 seconds by not getting stuck on that pillar, which would take his 133 down to 131, and then skipping the body armor saves like another 4 or 5 seconds down to 127 or 126. So even if we say like 127, well, that's still 6 seconds cut from Aztec 00 Agent, which would break the barrier. So there's no doubt that a barrier break is possible, even with just one level considered. Now, even if we don't get 127 here and get something like 129 or 130, well, we just have to look to a couple other levels to know that the barrier break is possible. On Surface 2 00 Agent, this has a history of being involved in barrier breaks as well, as it was actually the level where we saw the 110.59 barrier break happen by a sort of elusive speedrunner named Fernando, who was one of the first to incorporate this insane fence camera shot where you can shoot the far camera through the fence based on how the game loads various objects. He got a time of 121 on Surface 2 00 Agent this way. Now, the record here is 118 by Clemens, an untitled record, but we've seen Ilu fail 116, missing only one camera with a nade throw technique, and this is a strategy that works. He has hit this strategy before, just not on a completed untitled record pace run. And so we know 116 on Surface 2 00 Agent is possible, maybe even lower than that.
was an insane run. I probably missed the nade throw by a hair.
There's another 2 seconds. You know, I was watching Ace's Bunker 2 Double Agent 49, which is an untied world record by 2 seconds. But, you know, he's a very good player, very skilled player, and lower could happen here. We see him get kind of badly hung up in this section of the stage around the safe. And so, like, Bunker 2 Double Agent 47 is possible. And even just on these 3 levels that I've pondered, we can cut 6, 8, 10 seconds from the game. And so the barrier is definitely entirely possible to be broken. And remember what Henrik and I discussed a few years ago is that the plausible times will happen, plus some unexpected ones as well. But the reality is that the pace of records is slowing down. You know, we've only seen about a half dozen in the past 2 calendar years. And so the community has now taken it upon themselves to heavily incentivize new untied world records. And people are starting to say, you know what, I'll pay $50 per any second cut, $100 per any second cut. Right now, as it stands, there's like over $500 for grabs for any 1 second that you or I or anyone could pick up the controller and cut from the game, a new untied world record in the game's main categories, Agent, Secret, and Double Agent. And that's a lot of incentive to play GoldenEye, you know, maybe more incentive than ever has been before. I guess as it turns out, you know, 20, 30 years on, a lot of us who speedran the game and have been involved in the community, you know, we're a little bit more established and successful in our lives now. And so a lot of guys can say, yeah, you know, here's 50 or $100 to cut a second from the game. Happily to see this remarkable milestone being broken. You know, if someone were to get Aztec Double Agent 127 and cut 6 seconds, that's like $3,000 up for grabs for that untied world record, which is more than ever has been at stake in the history of GoldenEye speedrunning. So will it happen? The answer is almost certainly yes. There's so much incentive, it's such an amazing barrier. It still may take another year or 2 based on how the pace of play has been lately, but it will happen. And this brings up the next great question, which is like, is another barrier possible? Can another 60 seconds be cut from the game? Surely we're slowing down now. And I would say, like, man, that gets into the real nitty-gritty of the game. You know, maybe, I'll give it a maybe that 108.59 could happen someday, but this would take so much effort and, like, decades of time and perfection on all the known strategies, plus, of course, the ones that you're not expecting. So that's why 109.59 is widely believed to be the final barrier in the game. You know, we've optimized this so much. It was easy to say 20 years ago, like, of course, we're going to find another 60 seconds. And we see even Ace doubting that in his 2016 thread, but we found time. But there does get to this end point where there's going to be no more time to be found. I think, you know, we're not going to see 107, 106 barrier unless, like, a massive game-breaking strategy is found on a level like Control or Statue. So eventually you run out. But this 109.59 barrier break is going to be a massively celebrated thing in GoldenEye, and we are all keen to see how it unfolds. So hey, keep your eyes peeled on the channel. I'm sure pretty much any untied world record I'll probably do a video about until the barrier break. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the channel members and the Patreon supporters for your support on my work here. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream or video.